everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your week. I know everybody's got lots of places to be, so we appreciate you being here. We're going to talk through some things we got going on in fourth grade and give you more information than you probably ever really wanted to know, but we're gonna hand it over to you. So I'm going to kick it off with Mrs. Prenslow talking about what she's talking about. So we'll let you go.
Okay, thank you so much, like Dr. Morgan said, for coming. This is just kind of an overview of what the night's going to look like. So we're going to kind of take a peek into your fourth graders and what we're seeing in all of our data and testing results from things that we've looked at this year. We will talk about what changes we've kind of made in fourth grade this year to accommodate some of the testing data that we've gotten in. And then we have a little like parent-friendly guide for how to read some of these things, because a lot of it is just like education lingo, and not a single one of you are uneducated, but there's just a lot of words that live in our world that are hard to sometimes understand outside. And then we'll talk through science and social studies and what that's looking like, and we'll wrap up with grading and report cards. Here we go.
Oh. You just wanted to see me twice. So here I am. Okay. So really what I want to give you is kind of an overview of where your kids have been and why we are where we are and what we're doing to help with that. So you lived it. The dreaded C word, COVID, really rocked especially this group's world. So these sweet pumpkins, if you remember when we went on shutdown, were coming out of preschool, and then their first full year in school was masked. And so we know now that this particular group, in terms of speech concerns, in terms of understanding phonics and letter sounds and identification of numbers and all of the things that go in with language, this group was seriously impacted because all of those skills are really hit hard in kindergarten and first grade. So if you remember back to that dreaded time, and some of you won't want to think about it, we had COVID lockdown, then we had masking, then we had continued COVID protocols, which would have been their first grade year, which I affectionately call 2-symptom Sally time. So if kids came in, you remember if they had like the sniffles and a cough, we were like, out you go for 2 weeks, see you again, like good luck, and here's some e-learning things you can try. We all tried our best, we did our best at that time. We know now that we probably needed to have our hands on kids a little bit more than we were able to at that time. So this is kind of where we've been. As we got them back full force in second grade, we really worked hard to patch some of those things that we noticed right away, particularly with this grade. You know, we implemented all of those great strategies and pulling them out in guided reading and small group intensive reading things. We had Mrs. Dennis working hard in math, and we continued our Core 1 instruction. We also switched reading instruction as they went into third grade. We got a new reading curriculum in K1-2 that was really centered on phonics and phonemic awareness. We didn't have that for those kiddos, and then they were masked, and then they were out. So kind of a perfect storm of educational opportunities for them. As they got into third grade, we're up and running now on comprehension and all of those deep thinking skills that come along with reading, still trying to fill in some of those gaps with what reading is. In the same context of math, we're up and running with all these deep story problems, multi-step, all these things. We're still working on number sense because they missed big chunks of those. So everybody pushed. We're in fourth grade now, and we're not seeing the big shifts that we wanted to coming out of their data in the fall here. That's why we're here talking about what these ladies around me are working really hard in fourth grade at, what it means for your kids, and what our plan is to move them forward. We did this in a group setting to give you more information. You're going to have all of this data and all of these pieces so that you can ask the questions that you're having as you go into parent-teacher conferences and so on and so forth throughout the year. So welcome to intense instruction and what's going to happen and what we're all doing for your kiddos. So I will pass the torch to the next presenter.
That's you. That's me. And I'm going to go from here because I'm going to use this little document camera. But I get to talk to you about your testing results 101. In your packet that you got at the door, they're kind of the testing results that you usually would get at parent-teacher conferences. And these are kind of the tests that we have gone by to kind of guide our instruction and why we're doing some of this. I think at the very back of it, I think it's the third one, you have one that looks, maybe,
Hold on. Just
it
come.
says Fast Bridge, or Fast Family Report. I think it's the very last one.
We'll
just kinda
float around
It'll work, okay? This is basically a very fast, quick test. It was very broad. It is very adaptive to each student, so as they take it, it kind of adjusts to their level. Our interventionists, Mrs. Dennis and Mrs. Goebbels, use the scores off of that to kind of see which kiddos they need to pull for a little bit more extensive help on things. And that's kind of the scores that they use. The next one is probably one that you have probably seen over the last 2 or 3 years, your MAPS test. That one probably looks rather familiar to you. Again, that one is adaptive. It is one that we have used in the last, 6 years, I suppose, at least the whole time we've been here. I lost my whole train of thought. It does show over a period of time, and we kind of use this rather easily for us because we can kind of see what information that those kiddos are struggling with, because it gives it to us immediate results right away. We don't have to wait, like used to be in state testing, we would have to wait probably during the summer, like they'd take it in May and we wouldn't get those results back until September, October. We get this pretty much the same day that they take it. So we can kind of see at a glance what different things that they are looking at. The kids kind of understand this. They have looked at this a lot. They go by the RIT score, and you've probably heard your kids maybe even talk about that. We talk about that as their target score. They understand numbers. They want that number to go up, and they get that. We've also used this to set goals with our students, and we use that again to kind of increase their scores throughout the year, and you can kind of see whether they have gone up or down. It's kind of color coded, so it makes it colorful for them, but your kiddo is in blue. The orange part there is what it looks like as a whole district in Arlington, and the yellow is kind of the norm, what everybody took in the United States at this time, what that actually looked like. But it does show a nice progression, hopefully always going up. That's kind of our goal there. The last one is one that we just started this year. It's one that the 4th grade is the only one doing this one right now, and it's called iReady. And your kiddos might have came and told you, wow, we really took this test, and actually they enjoyed this test. It was kind of fun when we talked to them about it. They seemed to say, oh yeah, it gives us a little brain break in between, and they could play a little game in the middle of it, basically to bring them back. But this test actually gave us a ton of information. It's broken down for teachers, and if you wanted to see it, we could share it with you as well, but by the state standards that we have to teach by law for Nebraska. So it will take all of those scores and it can share with you where your child is according to what they're supposed to know according to our state standards, okay? We can see how they're progressing through that and where they might need a little bit more of some in-depth instruction on that. How it's been working so far is we spend probably about 45 minutes maybe throughout the whole week. So we might spend maybe 10 minutes one day, 10 minutes another day. Maybe we can spend maybe 15 minutes another day, but our goal is to have them spend about 45 minutes on it is a computer program, but it is an individualized, it's called their individualized path of learning. So each child, the test is taken, all of that information, and they have given them their own individualized path according to where they are at. So if they're really struggling with this, they're getting it at their level to kind of help them improve. If they're really, being a rock star at it, it's going to be adaptive enough to push them up to that. The kids don't mind doing it, so that's good. What we do, it's not like we're just sitting back as teachers, just sitting back drinking coffee and watching them do that. We're actually working really hard because we're taking and pulling small groups. So if we have maybe 3 kiddos that are really struggling with place value, we can take those 3 kids, have a nice little mini lesson to get them back on track to keep them going. Then maybe we have another group that is struggling, say, with fractions or adding or subtracting fractions. Okay, they might not have even gotten to that yet but they knew enough to get to a certain point, but they're stuck now. We can take that group, give them a little bit of instruction. They'll get more instruction when they do the lesson, and that moves them up as well. So it's very adaptive to each individualized student. It's really pretty cool, actually. And hopefully that will move them up quicker too, because like I said, you're not holding them back. And those kiddos that need extra instruction, they're getting that. We're pulling them in all of those small groups to give that. If you look at the iReady paper that you have, it does show you, and we're going to kind of share some information on it. They're actually in color. The green part, the green is where 4th grade should be, okay? Your child is in the blue, okay? So they might be up in that green part. They might be pretty close to the green part. They might be down further in the green part, and we're trying to move them up. If you don't like graphs, they've got a little down underneath there where it says scale score, and it gives you a number. If you are on grade level, like at 4th grade, it says up here, on grade level between 465 and 526. So they can kind of see where you're at, or how close you are to being on that. Off to the side, you have some things that talk about the domains. In other words, what they're actually looking at in those areas, like number and operations, and it will tell you, are you approaching 4th grade? Are you at 4th grade? Are you on level? Are you above level? Is that something we really need to target? So that helps us out a lot too. The algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data and geometry. And reading has the same thing with their domains. I don't have that in front of me. With your phonological awareness, your phonics, high frequency words, vocabulary comprehension, it kind of tells you where your child is at according to our state standards, because it goes by our state standards. It's very good with that. On the back, I kind of like this as well. On the back, it tells you what your child did really, really good at, and what are some things that maybe they might need some extra information on or some extra help on, that they're probably getting pulled into a small group at some point in time to work on that. I know, and this is just, I teach the math, and I know we're really rocking it in math right now, and they're kind of actually enjoying it. We were getting flagged a lot in geometry. Well, geometry is always usually taught at the end of the year, might not have gotten to it yet when they had taken the test, and they were getting flagged in it. And it was like, well, most of geometry is vocab. There's a lot, believe it or not, a lot of vocabulary in math. And if they know what those words mean, they can usually do pretty well on it. We've spent this week, we're just taking a whole week, and we're spending maybe 20 minutes every day going over some vocabulary. I took a test on Sunday because I couldn't figure out. It's like, what are you getting flagged on all this? And so I took a test that they had to take, and it is a lot of vocabulary, so that's why we're pulling that in now. Because they're going to see it on those adaptive tests with each test that they do. They're gonna see a little bit of it. So that's one thing. We're doing that as a whole class because the whole class is kind of struggling with it. They kind of like it. And that, whoa, that makes more sense now. So I think we're really hitting where the areas where they need the help. And we're not drilling and killing something that they already know, because we want them to move forward with that. Like I said, the back page kind of gives you a lot of a breakdown onto the skills maybe that we could use a little extra push on. So that's kind of test reading 101 here. We're good.
Okay, so it's my turn, and most of you don't know me because this is my first year here, but I've taught for 7 years in various districts, and I am one of the resource teachers here. This is also another resource teacher, Mrs. Jenkins. She will be here until she has a baby, and then she's never coming back. She'll back. Not until February or March, so we're really sad about that. But the reason why we are here is because we are all hands on deck in the 4th grade, and we do a lot of co-teaching opportunities. So even if your student doesn't receive services through an IEP, I might see them in a group, not because they're special ed or because of resource, but because, again, we're all hands on deck, and we have a lot of different expertise in specific areas. And so if your child is struggling with something, I'm here to help, and so is Mrs. Jenkins, obviously the classroom teachers too. So we do a lot of rotation of groups, and I don't know, I bet your kiddos have come home and they're like, I saw Mrs. Bierman and Mrs. Jenkins and Mrs. Prenzler today, all in 30 minutes. And so that's what we do best. We work together, and we look at the data to determine what we need to teach. So I'm very excited about that. It worked really well. So in regards to reading, I know you have your iReady assessment. So if you want to grab those out one more time, that has the domain on the right side, and the domain on the right side shows you where they might be struggling or where they're at. So if you look at that first one, it says phonological awareness, and usually that's mastered by 3rd or 4th grade. If it says not assessed, then they probably have mastered that skill already based on the adaptive scale. But if your students are still struggling in that, this is where we do a lot of adding and deleting sounds, and it's all by our hearing. So for example, if I say boat without b. Word is boat. Okay? So sometimes that's kind of our basic foundation of reading, is being able to hear those sounds. Talking about the mask, if we have the mask on, and the students are reading my lips and trying to hear those sounds, there's a big disconnect there. So don't feel discouraged if that is something that your kiddo needs to work on, because again, there's a lot of things that we're just plugging in, and we're working on it here at school as well. The 4th grade team has done a really good job of creating activities. So at the end, we'll talk about that, but or if you're like, I really need help in this category, reach out to one of us and we will gladly help you. The next area in your domain is phonics. These are, in the 4th grade, decoding words like Greek words with multi-syllables, but in that 2nd and 3rd grade, it's more like diphthongs, TH sounds, silent letter combos, R-controlled vowels, vowel teams. So like OA together says O. AR says R. Okay? High frequency words, everyone did a really good job at that. These are just words that we should know. They're heart words. They're words that we should know by heart. Vocabulary. In the 4th grade, using context clues to figure out the meaning of a word without actually saying what the word means in a sentence. Right now we're working a lot of prefixes, so like preheat the oven, and like pre-planned. So what we're doing in groups is we are using these words in sentences. And when you're at home, I encourage you to use some of these prefix words, like, hey, will you go preheat the oven, please? And then, since they know what that is, they should. 'Cause we've been talking about it a lot.
That one's in there.
Should be in there.
Yes.
They're gonna know. So in that vocabulary, using those prefixes and suffixes, expanding your vocabulary at home is something that we would really appreciate here, and we're gonna continue to do that in class. In the area of comprehension literature, that's fiction, so that's fake stories, made up stories. In the 4th grade, students should be able to identify the theme and provide text evidence. That means that you figure out what the theme is, and then you have to tell me, well, where did you find that at in the book? So if he was a happy person, where in the book, what page is that on? How do you know he's happy? So when you're reading at home with your child, like asking them those deeper questions, yeah, we probably know he's happy, but where did you find that? What page number did you find that on? And then that last category is informational text, and this is nonfiction text. This has to do with facts, more of those facts. So determining the main idea and supporting details in the 4th grade, that's what we want. Before I turn it over to math, I want to clarify that a standard is where the 4th graders are expected to be. So a lot of these iReadies base off 4th grade standards. So when we are talking about standards, this is where we want them to be as 4th graders. And I think sometimes we don't know like what is standard based, what is grading based, and we'll talk about that during report cards. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, but Ms. Jenkins is going to take it away.
Mine is a little more self-explanatory. Math is a little more black and white than reading is, where it has a lot of those kind of terms like what does phonological awareness mean and phonics and all of that. So mine is just looking at those areas of math and kind of seeing where your child falls. So again, kind of some of those expectations. So numbers and operations is just knowing like base level, knowing your numbers 1 to 120, and then it goes all the way up to like knowing your numbers to 1,000,000. You might have place value in that, fractions and decimals, being able to recognize and read those numbers, and then you kind of have all of that in between. So we start with fractions and things like that, and then they obviously get a little bit more complex. So kind of seeing where your child is on that scale is kind of helpful. So then you have algebra and algebraic thinking, which when I think algebra, I'm thinking like high school, X times, whatever. But this kind of just brings like 7 plus 5 equals what? That's kind of where it starts, and then they have to kind of progress where they take like, well, 5 plus something equals 7. And taking out some of those and just being able to rearrange those numbers and make sense of it. And then it kind of moves up to just the basic adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing. So I know when we think algebra, a lot of times we're thinking like crazy, like why is a kid in the 4th grade learning algebra? That's nuts. But it's just basically kind of those operations, moving from basic and then knowing those facts and things too. Then we have measurement and data. That starts off kind of in the 1st grade of just looking at pictures and graphs and counting of how many, and then it moves all the way up to being to kind of analyze some of those, to answer questions about line plots. And then it goes all the way to like making your own line plots and using line plots to solve those real world problems. So again, kind of a big scale there, but really that's a lot of the real life problems of things that they're going to see, and being able to look at pictures and how they can apply that. And then geometry, again, is kind of another one that in my brain, I think like, why is a 4th grader learning geometry? But it starts again, kind of with those shapes, knowing 2D shapes, circles, squares, how many sides does a circle, or not a circle, a square have? And then moving on to some of those more complex shapes like the quadrilaterals, the rhombuses, all of those things, angles they'll start to talk about in 4th grade. So kind of the scale there of what you're thinking, just the basics of those things. And we can kind of get you more information if you want to see what is kind of where your child is, but we didn't want to throw too much information at you. We just kind of wanted to go over what those main areas that we're looking at are and what they kind of will look like on that sliding scale to kind of see where your child is in those areas. So that's all I kind of in the math world there.
All right, my turn. Okay, so social studies, science, writing. It's been quite the fun schedule change. So after our schedule change, basically now we're doing it by like semester basis. So from now till Christmas, I will be teaching science. And then once we come back from winter break, and then to the end of the school year, I'll be teaching social studies. I think it's been really beneficial because instead of getting just the 30 minutes that I had at the very beginning of the school year, now I'm getting a full hour to deliver that content, and the students are getting like a lot more practice doing the notes, the hands-on activities, the labs, which I know they really enjoyed. And then within social studies and science, I am throwing in writing as well. So like when we do labs or projects, I am having them doing writing pieces about like what they did. And then also we have been doing grammar, really hitting grammar and spelling really hard, which I'm sure you know about because I know they love it every week, having a test on Friday. Yeah, I mean, basically that's all. That's what's going on in my world. Not anything special.
Yes, I must have drawn some kind of short straw because I got the grading, which is probably what everybody's most concerned about in this situation. Because we are altering schedules and we are plugging in and filling in gaps, we just had a really honest conversation with Dr. Morgan, and we said, hey, if we want to do this and we want to fill in some of these gaps that we are seeing based on our data, how does that look in like a gradebook situation? Because we are grading on fourth grade content, fourth grade standards, as all the other fourth grade teachers in this state are. But what we're working on in class may not always be that fourth grade material that we're assessing. Your child is still getting fourth grade curriculum, but it looks a little different. So we do like an hour and 45 minutes of reading, and then I see each class 3 times, and we do an hour and 45 each time. So I deliver like the fourth grade instruction of what they need at fourth grade level, and then a lot of our practice and our work might just be like a passage that has like third grade text, but we're still using the fourth grade concept of how do we find a character, how do we find the theme, what are we saying about this? And so a lot of the day is really differentiated, like based on their testing results, which you have in front of you for just your child, but we see all 50 something of them. And so we have different plans for each kiddo, and we're getting them what they need. So on the gradebook side of things, it's getting a little unique. And some of you might have seen midterms, and you might have read that letter on the front. And then we did have some statements in your grading within that band. It might have said something like along the lines of, your child is assessed at a different level or something like that. So whatever we choose to grade, if it happens to be something that is not on that fourth grade level, then we put that statement in on that assignment or on that overall subject. So if you are seeing those statements, just know it's because a lot of the practice that we did that week or that topic or that unit ended up being at a different level for your child specifically. So when we go in and do those reports and our progress reports and all of those things, we can individually comment on each kid, just like we're individually giving the instruction for each kid. Questions on PowerSchool or grading? Keep checking it. We obviously still make mistakes, so if we like put in a 0, it may not actually be a 0, or any of those things. But if you have questions on what assignment is for what or where your kiddo is standing on, let us know. We're totally open. That's kind of the whole premise of this night meeting. We know it's taking time out of your busy schedules, and we appreciate it, but it just felt like too much to talk about in a 15-minute conference. There's just a lot of information. We've done a lot of digging so that we can really target that specific skill that each one of them individually needs. So that's why we're so thankful you're here, but also why we're doing this. And we really just have, so as a fourth grade, we have kind of picked out some of those things that we think are most valuable resources for you. And we've
made lots of them. So there is a whole table of reading activities that are like more like games for you to play at home if you would like to grab some of them. There's like instructions and then different levels. You can grab every single one if you want to. You can be like, ooh, I saw vocabulary. I'm gonna grab the vocabulary ones. Then on the second table back there, there's a math bag that has like a deck of cards and dice and activities to do with the cards and the dice that should strengthen some of those things. Like we just want you to go home and play games with your kids. Like 4th grade, we're not sending home a ton of homework. So if you could just reserve some time, I know everybody's busy, they're all in all the sports, we hear about it. They're doing all the things and we love that. We want a very well-rounded 4th grader. But if you start to carve out some time and help us kind of close that gap, we would just so much appreciate it. We'll be around, all of us. If you have any specific questions about your kiddo, all of us can speak to it, I'm sure, because we see all of them. So there are reading games back there, there are math games back there. Before we officially end, does anybody have a question they want to ask in front of the whole group?
Sounds like you guys are